And one of the things I want this conversation to do is to provide people a nuanced and textured understanding of not just what makes you who you are, but of people being able to look at your nuance and your texture and see that their own lives are written the same way.
But Dr. Sean, I'm not the only black woman who's been misunderstood. I think so many of my sisters walk into workplaces, and if they're not smiling or if they don't have a certain expression on their face, people misinterpret it as them being angry or mad. Sisters are misunderstood in all types of spaces, and so the fact that my story is misunderstood, or in fact I'm underestimated, it's very common in our journey as African Americans in a nation that hasn't come to fully understand us.
Yeah, that's clap-worthy. No, I agree with that. I agree. I think black women are, probably the most misunderstood aspect of the American population.
Well, when you think about it, I was, as a member of Trump's senior staff, the only African American woman to serve in the senior staff of the administration and to hold the position of assistant to the president, which is the highest. I looked around the table and there was no one that looked like me.
How did that make you feel?
No, the question is, how did it make them feel? Because I knew that I was in my proper space. I knew that I was meant to be at that table. And so they needed to examine why I was the only African American at a table that was so important.
So it didn't make you feel some type of way at all?
Let me just tell you, let me tell you what I felt on so many occasions when I looked to my left, and at that time, Steve Bannon was to my left, and on my right, Stephen Miller was on my right, and across from me was Kellyanne Conway or Sean Spicer, all of these characters that we hear about, but I felt this immense pressure to represent for people who often didn't have a voice or would never have an opportunity to be in a room where billions and billions of dollars in funding for infrastructure or taxes or education were discussed. And I was there representing so many of us and our experiences in our communities that are so diverse. I felt this immense amount of pressure. And that's probably the only way I could express, because there were so many other things that, those silent indignities, where you raise someone's name and they say, well, what is that? I say, oh, we should call it National Urban League or National Action League. What is that? Well, we all know what the Urban League is and how important it is, or National Action Network or NAACP. But the fact that these weren't organizations that they understood the work that they're doing, at times I was just, I was just amazed.
We're going to talk in depth about your time in the White House. But your comments just make me want to ask you now, how can I put this? Do you feel like you accomplished much in that environment?
Oh, yeah. There's a saying that as long as the hunter is telling the story, then the lion will always be the aggressor.
Right.
People have told my story about my 12 months in the administration, and they often forget about the work that I did for black farmers or for African Americans in law enforcement or historically black colleges and universities. And you know why they play it down? Because it's not important to them, but it was critical to us. I knew what I was doing. They didn't understand the importance of the work that I was doing.
Can I say that I had a show a few weeks ago with some black Republicans who would come on the show, and they were making their case for why black people should be Republicans. And good people, I wish them well, God bless them, go in peace. But what I thought was lacking in their whole presentation was being able to make a case for what it was the administration had done, or Republicans are doing, that would make black people want to be a part of it.
Well, it was interesting because so much of the opposition that I got was from black Republicans who felt like, why is this Democrat sitting at a table with Donald Trump when we have been in the Republican Party for all these years? And so much of the opposition that I got was from black Republicans who had toiled in the party for a very long time and who felt that, Omarosa shouldn't be sitting at the senior staff table. I should be sitting there because I've been a Republican my entire life. Well, I'd like to let you all in on a little secret about Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a Democrat when I met him. I mean, if you followed anything about Donald Trump, Ivanka was a Democrat when I met her. Jared was a Democrat when I met him. I was sitting at the table with so many who had the same type of ideology that I did. And so, yes, Black Republicans, I mean, they're a very interesting breed, but but it's very hard for me when I would come to the table and say, okay, we're here. And what have you all been doing, you know, in the party for the last 25 years? And they couldn't show me what they had accomplished. And I understand why, because we still suffer from this division within our own culture, you know, this need that I'm going to tear down Omarosa to make myself look good. And so a lot of those stories about Omarosa not accomplishing things came from those very people that you interview, and that's okay. Yeah. Because, you know, I have no problem with people kind of spreading these falsehoods because the truth always rises to the surface. Yeah, at the end of the day. It always rises.
So let me ask you this. You first met Donald Trump on The Apprentice, is that right?
That's correct. I met Donald Trump in September of 2003.
And I'm dying to ask you, what was Trump like then, and how's it different from what he is now?
I'm so glad you asked that because there were so many people who tuned into the first season of The Apprentice. In fact, our demographics back then showed that there was a significant portion of the African American community who tuned in. And we all tuned in because there was some part of that Donald Trump that was very aspirational, you know? And when they advertised The Apprentice, I don't remember if you remember Dr.Sean, there was a lot of hype, you know? You could be the next apprentice and lead my company. Do you all remember this?
Yeah, I remember.
And I thought, you know, fresh out of Howard University, armed with a degree, you know, I'm ready to go. I thought, you know, the Donald Trump that I met on that first day in the boardroom certainly had accomplished so much, had built this empire, only to discover that we all were duped. Right. That it was all just a house of cards. Yeah. That he, in fact, had been given all of this money from his father, and that this empire that he said was just so grand and massive was just really just like almost a Ponzi scheme, you know. But we're all discovering this now, but I bought into that illusion that was Donald Trump. Now he's like the man behind the curtain on Oz, you know, pushing the buttons. Yeah. And so I was aspiring to be like someone who was not real. And so now, you know, and everybody's like, how could you not know back in 2003 that Donald Trump was all of these things? And the truth of the matter is, you know, I got duped. And unfortunately, I believe that the American people have also gotten duped by Donald Trump. It's probably one of the greatest cons in the history of this country.
Of the world.
Oh, it's a...
of the world. But you know what this points to, Omarosa, is at a certain point, you have to stop blaming the liar and start looking at the people who are not victims but volunteers.
Wow.
This nation
Go ahead, Dr.Sean, and preach up in here. Okay, Dr.Sean.
This is a nation that wants to be lied to.
Yeah.
And so it admitted into its confidence a liar. You know, it's interesting because it makes me want to ask you, and I think you've kind of answered it, but maybe you can go more in depth. What made you support him for president?
Well, I talk about this in my New York Times best-selling book, Unhinged.
Which we will talk about, I promise.
I talk about the fact that I, initially supported an effort called Ready for Hillary. And they had asked all of these African-American faith leaders to support her. And so I was on with Hillary 2 or 3 years before she even announced.
Really?
Uh-huh. I write about this extensively in Unhinged. And, when she decided to roll it over into her campaign, she had promised so many of us that she would hire us because of the work we did. And instead, she took our list and our contacts, and she only hired one Caucasian male. And all of the African-American staffers and supporters from Ready for Hillary were left by the wayside. And she talked about that in her own book, Shattered, about how she regretted that move. And as a result, it opened up this interesting space where Donald Trump called me and said, hey, kiddo, I'm thinking about really doing it this time. And the reason he's saying it this time is because I knew him from '03, and every 4 years the man was threatening to run for president.
Threatening is the right word.
And so when he called me this time, he's like, be in New York in a month and a half. I'm telling you, I'm going to announce. And Michael Cohen called me. He's like, for real, kiddo, look, he says you're going to come, you're going to work. And Donald Trump said something interesting on that call. He said, I need your help. You're one of the few people that I know who ever worked in the White House before. And so I'm thinking at this point, we'd known each other for about 14, 15 years, and I considered him a friend. And I'm like, my friend wants to run for president. And no one took him seriously. And I'm a political operative. I'm thinking, baseball is baseball, whether you're
right.
for the Reds or for the Mets or for whatever. And so I went after the announcement, and the announcement was so bad. Do you all remember the announcement?
Yeah, how could we not?
Mexico is sending its people.
Yeah,
they're sending
murderers.
right. And I remember walking in the office going, have you lost your mind? You have, I remember talking him through it, and I'm thinking, okay, let me help him at least save him from himself.
Let me push. Can I push?
Now, I just want to finish this point because you asked me how.
Why did you run out?
Why would I?
Why wouldn't you?
If they weren't taking him seriously, and I had been working on projects with him for so long, to me, this was just another one of those projects that Donald Trump starts and not always successful
So you didn't
at.
take him seriously?
For the most part, no. I mean, there were only like 14 of us on the campaign at that point. Can you run for president with 14 staffers? You know what I mean? At that point, what's the harm in going to advise him so that he doesn't further embarrass himself? And that was really kind of the thinking. But as you can see, that small campaign turned into a movement, and Donald Trump became president. And I think that he was just as surprised as all of us.
Yeah,
that he became president.
That's exactly where I was going to go, because take us into the night of the election. What's going on behind closed doors when it becomes clear that he's going to win Ohio and he's going to be president?
We started winning early. So, we had a pathway. I was in Brett Parscale's office looking at the districts that were heavily African American, because that was my responsibility in the campaign. And I was just saying, please, Lord, just don't let the numbers drop below what Mitt Romney. So that was my whole focus on election night, was that my turnout was sufficient. And so I'm looking at data, but as I'm looking at African-American turnout, by the way, African-American men, 13% for Donald Trump, 6% overall. As I'm looking at the number, I'm looking at districts that were traditionally blue turning red, that traditionally would vote for the Democratic nominee who voted for Donald Trump. And I'm going, whoa, Donald Trump is about to become president. I literally, and Brad reminded me of it, I said, Donald Trump is about to become president. Oh no, Donald Trump is about to become president. I was like, oh no. That night was so surreal. And I can't even tell you, because I sat down as I was with the editors as I was working on the book, I honestly can't tell you how I got back and forth between the victory party and the office and like through all the security. But I was in all of these places because it was documented that I was on this interview and that interview. I did 28 interviews the night of the election. And I can't tell you how, because it was so surreal. And then somehow I'm on the stage with him, the moment after he's announced.
Could he believe it? Because I'm telling you, he had that look on his face.
Well,
like,
he kept telling us, stop jinxing us, because earlier I went up to give my last briefing, and I said, man, by this time tomorrow you're going to be president. He said, stop saying it. Stop saying that. Don't say that to me. I'm not going to. Stop it. He was very superstitious, and I don't believe in superstition. So I was like, yeah, okay. The number says, and he was just very like, don't talk about it. Do not call me Mr. President. No, we weren't allowed to do any of that. So I don't believe that he believed it at that point.
Hey.